What is the most effed up family secret that you know? My cousin ate my grandpa. She was a toddler and we were all spreading his ashes across the family farm. When it got to her, she did what toddlers do and grabbed a handful and just started chomping down. It was pretty funny to me, as an 8-year-old, but we aren't allowed to tell her about it. She's now 19 and I'm dying to let her know. The rumor in my family is that my great-grandma, Gigi, was a black widow. She had 4 husbands and all 4 of them died mysterious deaths. One of her husbands was stabbed to death by my Gigi's brother, and the story was my Gigi was being attacked by him and her brother walked in on it and had to kill him in self-defense. No charges were ever brought against either of them. My grandma, Gigi's daughter, stopped speaking to her when she was 18 in 1950, and my Gigi just died in 2014. She was 96. That's a long time to not speak to your mom. Something serious must have happened. The rumor was that my grandma knew for a fact that her dad was killed by my Gigi and she got away with it, but my grandma refuses to talk about it. Even after my Gigi's death, I actually grew quite close to my Gigi the last 10 years of her life, and she was the sweetest, most cliché old grandmother you could imagine 99% of the time. But every so often when something would make her angry, she would get this morbidly evil look on her face and it would make me think maybe all the rumors are true. My mother and I are pretty much convinced that my grandfather sired a child with his girlfriend while stationed in Europe in World War II. He didn't talk about the war very much, but we did know that he had a girlfriend for a long time while he was over there. They were apparently head over heels in love, and he was supposed to send for her when he got back to the States. He never did. Dish as that may be, and as heartbroken as we can assume she was, we never really thought too much of it. This sort of thing must have been fairly common. After he died, we sorted through all of his old photos and found of a woman. According to the note he'd written on the back, it was his girlfriend. In the picture, she's pointing at a fairly ample belly, beaming. We don't know with 100% certainty, but we're fairly sure that she was pregnant at the time the photo was taken, and very open about it. Makes me wonder why my grandfather never sent for her, and what cousins I may have wandering around Europe right now. I have a great aunt that one day just disappeared off the face of the planet. I believe this was in the 1940s or 50s around the Portland area, and she was in her mid-20s. Never had any problems with her family, was a bright and happy girl, and then suddenly never came home from work one day. The family had no idea where she went or why she would run away, so they all assumed she was either kidnapped or died somewhere never to be seen again. Flash forward 5 years and her brother is in Chicago on business. He leaves the office he was at for the day and sees her just walking down the street. He calls her name to make sure he's not just seeing things, and lo and behold she turns around and sees him. He stops her, asks what the hell, and she proceeds to dodge questions. She then invites him to the apartment she had been living at, promising that she'll explain everything, and they head there. As soon as they get there, brother starts firing the questions at her. She tells him to give her just a minute. She's going downstairs to the shop across the street to buy some cigarettes because this is all a huge shock to her as well. Brother, for some reason, decides to let her go alone. She never came back and was never seen again. We still have no idea what happened. My aunt got pregnant in high school. My grandparents were super Catholic, so abortion wasn't an option, and neither was the shame of having a pregnant daughter. They sent her off to a convent to live with nuns until she had the baby, then gave it up for adoption. A few decades later, she tracked the baby, now an adult, down through a private investigator, but he wanted nothing to do with her. I think she remains, to this day, quite upset about it. I am one of these babies. My birth mother got pregnant and my father told her that he would end the relationship if she kept me. She went from Indy to Michigan where her 32 years old uncle lived with his 19 years old wife. They agreed to adopt me. My birth mom went into the hospital under her uncle's wife's name, gave birth to me and went home with no one the wiser. Flash forward 20 years and I had the pleasure of meeting my birth grandfather for the first time, which also happened to be the first he had heard about me. Awkward. Also, my birth parents ended up getting married and had 2 kids, my full blood brother and sister. When I was a kid, my family had to cover our floor in salt, or we'd wake up every morning and our entire floor would be covered in slugs. Not just a few. It looked like we had a slimy black carpet. It was like something from a horror movie. I hated it at first, but I started to recognize them as the blessing they really are. You can squeeze them into your eye as a cure for dry eyes, or rub a few on a cut or scrape to help it heal faster. Their secretions contain a chemical or enzyme or something. IDK. It tastes weird, but it works. If you have a kid, or elderly person, with diaper rash, you can put a few slugs in their diaper next time you change them and they'll cure it right up. Anyways, we all thought that the slugs were getting into our house through the faucet in the bathtub, but it turns out my demented grandma was stealing them from my neighbor's slug hive. So in 1997 there was a slug shortage in North Houston caused by my grandma. I have so many questions. I'm going to interpret the question as strange so that I have a good answer. 20-30 years ago there was a thief in the town my family lived in. The person would break in and steal anything valuable plus their plants. Yes, plants. This goes on for a few months. When my family starts noticing my uncle is giving away a lot of random plants to family members, somebody, not sure who, found a stash of houseplants in his house, and that was the final straw. Turns out my uncle was into some weird dogs at the time, and would break into places high and steal plants, then wake up the next day with a house full of plants and try to give them away. I didn't know I was adopted until I was 18. Turns out my mom went crazy and was in a mental hospital for a little while. She banged some guy there and got pregnant with me, all while she was married to the man I call my father. He promised her to never speak of it and raise me as his own, and he did. Good man. One of our best friends accidentally found out, when he was 40, that he was adopted. Catholic Charities sent him mail that was really meant for his father. They have the same name, because his birth mother's family wanted to reach out to him. Talk about a shock. He confronted his dad. His adoptive mom had passed away, who started crying. They had never meant him to find out. Also, he has an older sister who's also adopted, and she has no idea. His dad swore him to secrecy, and incredibly, he's a piano prodigy, and his birth mom was, too. My mom always said she was arrested because of my dad. He smoked a lot of weed but supposedly he stored some in her car, and she was in trouble for that. My brother and I lived with my dad's adoptive parents for 5 years while our biological parents were in jail. I never asked about my real parents because, well, I thought that they were my parents. I was there as a baby until I was 5ish. They recently returned a bunch of things to me from when I was little, but included a lot of papers that appeared to be from court. Basically, we were taken out of my mom's custody because she was abusing us. The house was borderline unsanitary. There was weed in the fridge but very little food, and both my brother and I had tons of bruises. I had a broken rib, and my brother actually needed treatment for a fractured skull. It was noted that she had the opportunity to visit us on neutral ground and didn't show up. She was eventually granted a few days with us and was followed by someone from the court. She would just drive around for hours. For reasons I fail to understand, we were eventually returned to her custody. She had a new boyfriend, who also physically abused us. My brother is handicapped. He has muscular dystrophy, and she treats him like an infant. He believes every word she says, and resents my dad's parents for putting him in speech classes and asking his teachers to keep a close eye on his progress. They worried he would be developmentally delayed and wanted the best for him. He firmly believes they hated him, because mom has told him so. My mom will never tell him, or anyone, the truth, no matter what. She's somehow the victim in all of this. The heroic single mom doing her best. Narcissist logic. My mom is not my mom. My real mom apparently died of an overdose when I was 6 weeks old and I was found by someone coming to collect money from her. His girlfriend got mad at him for taking a child. I don't know all the details of how my mom ended up with me, but she went back to Arizona a year later and told everyone in her family she got pregnant while traveling with her band and doesn't know who the dad is. My grandfather cheated on my grandmother with some lady around the time I was born. She had his kid and it's been kept a secret in my family for decades. I'm 29 now. The funny thing is that only me, my grandmother and oldest uncle know. The only reason I know is because when I was living with my grandparents to help them out for a couple years, he asked me to help with setting up some online banking. He tells me he wants to set up auto payments to someone. Him being Italian and older, I took it as bill payments and not actually a physical someone. So as I'm doing it I ask him the companies he wants to set up and he says Julia. I told him I never heard of a company Julia Beer and asked what he used them for. Without a beat he says, to get back at your nonna. I was in awe and we spent the next 2 hours talking about it. He said my nonna cheated on him. So he did the only thing he thought would make it better and cheated right back on her. I found out I have a half uncle I had no idea existed and he's my age. I've tried to get him to tell me more and how I can find him but he's not budging. Even my oldest uncle won't talk to me about it. I think it would be pretty cool to have an uncle my age. I know my friend's secret, which is pretty effed up, and it's to do with his family. His mother, who was kind of hot, was a PRN star in the 70s and 80s but she later gave it up and married his father and so on. Anyway, a long story short, he got the internet in the mid 90s and started wanking, as you do. Before you think you know where this is going, you don't. He didn't go on the internet and find pictures of his mum that he didn't realize were pictures of his mum and wanked off to them. Oh no. He openly admitted to me that he consciously went looking for pictures of his mum and eventually found them out of curiosity, since apparently he'd known about her history from his father joking about it or something. But then after finding them, he realized that he actually kind of found it horny them and merrily bashed the bishop over them. I looked at him funny for about a month after that but eventually he showed me an old video of her in some grainy act of debauchery and I realized that, actually, I could see his point. I come from a pretty messed up family so I'll let you in on a few secrets and you can tell me which is the most messed up. My uncle Jeff got high and killed his best friend. But since my grandpa was the police chief he only got a slap on the wrist. Uncle Jeff would sell his daughters to random men for dog money. His wife divorced him and took the girls. A few years later they were both pregnant from their stepdad, who is a preacher. My grandpa died of AIDS but the family lied and said it was cancer because they didn't want to stain his reputation as an upstanding citizen. I still don't know he got it. Everyone pretends it never happened. Same grandpa used to make up stories about my mom, his daughter, cheating on my dad because he thought it was funny. He continued doing it even after he had to get her from the hospital because of the beatings that resulted. My grandma didn't want my uncle to marry because he was her favorite child so she paid some neighborhood thugs to kidnap and beat the girl as a message to stay away. My grandmother had a daughter before she had my auntie and my mother. This was never mentioned until about 25 years ago when the daughter turns up in our village having found out she was adopted. My grandmother had passed away by then. My great aunt is knew all along and knew who the father was, but refused to tell. They've now passed away too and there's nobody we can think of who might know who the father is. I never met my grandmother as she died before I was born but my mum always says that she had an air of sadness around her and she thinks this is why. It's not really a secret, it's on Wikipedia, but still, a couple hundred years ago, on my father's side, my family was some sort of Irish nobility, had a castle, but they left it. Why? Family arguments about someone marrying their first cousin. I hope the booty was worth it, a-hole. Because you literally effed us out of a castle. My grandmother and her business partner have been having an affair for over 30 years. He's married and the wife knows about it but just chooses to look the other way. When my grandpa found out about it, they separated but never divorced. I was the last of the children to discover this family secret. I only just found out a few years ago. My boyfriend's elderly aunt lives with another woman whom she introduces as a roommate. They've lived together for over a decade or something. My boyfriend was telling me about how they're always arguing like an old married couple, and how the roommate always comes to family functions over the holidays, etc. And I said, "Oh, so your aunt's a lesbian?" He paused with this confused look on his face and went totally silent. I could actually watch it dawning on him. He really hadn't realized that they were lovers. It was pretty cute. Sometimes people believe what we tell them, and then they just never realize how ridiculous it is. When I was 21, I am almost 24 now, my oldest sister told me that she was stranger violated when she was 17. Something I was shocked to hear because no one in my family has ever breathed a word of this to me and I have a big family. My sister is also 17 years older than me and people say we could be twins. I have asked my mom specific questions about my birth story for a class I had and she couldn't remember most of the answers to them, such as who was in the room when I was born and what time was I born. Also, my parents are extremely religious, Southern Baptist, and are thoroughly opposed to abortion. If you still haven't figured out what I'm getting at, I have a sneaking suspicion that I am really my sister's daughter, the illegitimate product of her RE, and my grandparents have been pretending to be my real parents all of this time, because that is totally something I could see my parents doing. I never had the courage to ask because I feel like it doesn't add up that my sister would tell me about it and exclude the part about me being her daughter if such was the case. Also, I don't want to offend her by making a traumatizing event in her life into being about me. Not so much of a secret as a crazy conspiracy theory. I asked my older brother about the truth. He was 12 at the time and we live together currently. He assured me that I am truly my parents' daughter and his sister. He has no reason to lie to me about it, and even if my parents made him swear an oath, he would tell the truth if I asked him outright. Sorry for the mundane ending, but now you all have closure and I have peace of mind that my existence isn't chronically traumatizing to my sister. Thank you all for your great suggestions on how to find a solution in a discreet manner, and thank you for motivating me to nut up and learn the truth. My wealthy cousins adopted 2 Ethiopian children, brother and sister, then sent them back because they didn't get along with the family's biological children.